You're watching VinylicPumaGaming. So Fallout 4 is a massive game with tons of different things for you to do, but there is a struggle sometimes to figure out what you want to do once you've completed the vast majority of the game's quests and explored most of the areas that the game can provide. So today, I figured I would go over 10 things that you can do if you're bored and if you've beaten a lot of the game already. Before we start, while this list is somewhat ordered, I'm going to have to say that none of these particular choices or things to do are really any better than the others. So even if something makes it to the number 1 spot on this list, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's better than the number 10 spot. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that this list combines some things that you can do when you're bored, as well as some things you can do once you've beaten the game. And I am going to assume that if you're watching this video, you've at least beaten the main story, and if you haven't and you're wanting to avoid some light spoilers, well, you've been warned. But without further ado, these are the top 10 things to do in Fallout 4 when you're bored or after you've beaten it, starting now. Number 10, download some mods. This one is pretty obvious, but now that all the versions of Fallout 4 have mod support, one thing that can bring a lot of life back to this game is to download some mods. Of course, the PC version will be the best platform in this regard, since there are no limits on the amount of mods that you can install. And while things may change later on down the road, the Xbox One is currently limited to 2 GB of storage for mods, while the PS4 is limited to both 2 GB and you can't add new assets to the game. Another advantage of the PC version in this regard is that you aren't permanently restricted to getting your mods from Bethesda.net, and you have several other places to get your mods. Probably the most notable place to get your mods is from nexusmods.com. When Fallout 4 first launched, Nexus Mods was the place to go to get mods, and in my personal opinion, is still really the best place. You'll also find that most modders now also port their mods across all platforms, so you may see a mod that starts off on nexusmods.com that ends up on Bethesda.net, and vice versa. Mods are great and are really one of the biggest selling points for buying a Bethesda Game Studios RPG. There are a lot of different mods out there, and you can get everything from visual improvement mods to weapon mods and even some quest mods as well. And what's also great is that since most mods are made by the community, as long as the community is around, you pretty much have an endless supply of mods, so that's pretty great, and ultimately it keeps the game alive a lot longer. Number 9, play with cheats. Assuming that you've beaten the game without cheats before, it might be fun to start a brand new character and play all over again, except this time you can use some cheats. Now, there's a good chance that you already know what the best weapons in the game are, so why not enter some console commands or use some cheat mods that allow you to start off with some of the best gear in the game. Or maybe you could go through a list and spawn in a bunch of resources to place in your workbench, so building settlements is much easier. You could also visit the developer room for Fallout 4, which is a room that consists of all of the available items that you can acquire throughout the game. And if you have DLC for Fallout 4, the items from the DLCs are also included in this developer room as well. Now, on console, you're not going to have access to console commands, so what you can do instead is download a mod called the Cheat Terminal, which allows you to do most of the things that I've discussed here. The Cheat Terminal for Xbox One allows you to have God Mode, infinite ammo, infinite carry weight, and you can also do things like add various items to your inventory, and you can also teleport to the secret developer room with this mod downloaded. Unfortunately, and at least for the time being, the Cheat Terminal is not available for the PS4, so you will need to download other mods like the Cheat Room or Cheat Containers. Just keep in mind that these two mods don't do everything that the Cheat Terminal does, but it does the vast majority of those things. Playing with cheats can be pretty fun for a little while, especially if you're looking for something to do. Number 8, build settlements. If you're into world creation games like Minecraft, Fallout 4 has a settlement system that should allow you to build a wide variety of different objects to mess around with. Now, first, you're going to have a fairly hard time acquiring the resources you need, so it would behoove you to either use console commands on the PC version to obtain the settlement resources you need, or download a console mod like the Cheat Terminal, which will give you the ability to spawn as many items as you need. Now from there, you could pretty much go ahead and start to build your own custom settlements. Maybe you could design certain themes around your settlements. So perhaps one settlement could be more like a farm where you focus on specific resources like purified water, various types of plants, or something else. Or maybe you could design a more military-based settlement where your settlers are equipped with some of the best armors and weapons. And you could probably also add some artillery cannons to that settlement as well. Now, I think you'll ultimately find that the settlement system is a lot better with mods. You can install some mods that will allow you to remove a lot of the trash and other clutter that's present in some settlements, and you can even add some new settlements or download overhaul mods, which greatly improve the look and feel of certain settlements. Editing, modifying, and building in your settlements can provide you with hours of fun and hours of stuff that you can do. You may find that you won't really ever have to leave Sanctuary just by messing around with the settlement building system. Number 7, mess around with CHEMS. So CHEMS in Fallout 4 are pretty powerful and allow you to gain some impressive abilities upon consuming them. It is recommended that you have both the Chemist and Chem Resistant perks maxed out before you decide to mess with CHEMS, as you can remove the possibility of addiction, as well as increase the length of time that the status effects are active. Most of your stat boosting drugs like XL, Mentats, and Psycho are pretty straightforward. However, Jet in Fallout 4 is pretty fun to mess around with, as it allows you to slow time, and it also alters some of the game's physics while time is slowed. You may notice that you can jump a little bit higher and stay up in the air a little bit longer while Jet is active. And you can also get some boosted fire rate and significantly reduced recoil on most weapons, which should allow you to unload into an enemy's face a lot easier when Jet's effects are active. And what's also great about Jet is that it's one of the easiest chems in the game to craft. All you need is 2 fertilizer and 1 plastic to craft one, and provided you've built your settlements up and you've got some Brahmin, 1 Brahmin will produce 1 fertilizer per day. Now, there are some other interesting chems that you can play around with, like Overdrive, which boosts damage and allows for random critical hits like you saw in previous Fallout games. There are Sludge Packs, which boost your radiation, which makes builds that rely on radiation a little more practical. And then, of course, there's Calmex or Calmex Silk, which boosts your sneak attack multiplier. Ultimately, chems are pretty fun to use, although I would say out of all of them, my favorite one to use is probably Jet. Number 6, mess around with the Power Armor JETPACK. So once you get to a certain point in the Brotherhood of Steel questline, or provided your science and armor perks are high enough, you can build a customization for your power armor that allows you to rocket up to places that you couldn't normally reach. Even relatively low structures and places like Sanctuary Hills are now accessible, provided that you have attached a jetpack to your power armor. Now, the jetpack consumes a portion of your fusion core as well as your action points, so you'll generally find that the best way to increase your flight or propulsion time is to help make your fusion core usage more efficient and also try to acquire more action points for your character. There's a set of unique combat armor leg pieces known as the freefall armor that can only be acquired by going to mass fusion with the power armor jetpack and traversing the area to get to the chest where they're located. So it is worth acquiring a jetpack customization from the Brotherhood or by crafting one yourself. If you're not a fan of power armor, you can actually download some mods that will allow you to use a jetpack without having to wear power armor. And you can also download some mods that enhance the jetpack's potential where the action point drain is lower, or you can download some mods that remove the flight time limit so you can fly really high up into the air. Now, using the jetpack will allow you to get to previously impossible to reach areas both with and without mods, and you may find that this can be pretty fun. You may also find that it's useful in combat. What you can do is you can quickly rocket yourself up into the air and then fall, and the ensuing fall will stagger surrounding enemies. Number 5, do some role-playing. While Bethesda eliminated the variety and dialogue options and consequences of those options that we saw in previous Fallout games, you can still do a limited amount of roleplay in your new playthroughs in Fallout 4. Perhaps your first playthrough was mostly a good guy type playthrough. Maybe you could do a second playthrough where you try to kill almost every NPC that you come across. Something that you may not have realized is that Fallout 4's only essential faction leader is Preston Garvey, and this means you could feasibly kill the heads of the Railroad, Institute, and the Brotherhood of Steel the very first time that you meet them. And this is kind of bizarre since the Minutemen are traditionally considered to be a good faction, where you as their leader are ultimately a murdering psychopath. So I guess there's sort of some irony there. Something else you could do is plan out a specific build based on one of the faction types that you find throughout the game. Let's say you want to be a Brotherhood soldier. Maybe you do some of the Brotherhood quests, and you act like the Brotherhood does in the game by being really mean to super mutants and ghouls, and maybe you treat Nick Valentine like crap. Or maybe you decide that you want to be a raider so you can complete the Nuka World DLC and conquer the rest of the Commonwealth that way. For the most part, I'd say the possibilities here are endless because a lot of it comes down to your own imagination and what you decide to ultimately do. Unfortunately, you can't play as like robots, super mutants, and various animals and creatures, but you could probably download and find some mods that will allow you to do that as well. Role-playing still has a place in Fallout 4, and you might just find that you can have some fun while doing it. Number 4. Play on survival/very hard mode. So if you've beaten the game a couple times on normal mode or lower, I actually recommend that you go ahead and try playing this game on a higher difficulty level. Provided you have the 1.5 patch or newer installed for Fallout 4, survival mode will be updated to require you to occasionally drink water, eat food, and sleep in beds. You can also contract diseases, which will negatively affect your stats by increasing the amount of damage you can take, lower your carry weight, or something else. You can also only save by sleeping in a bed in survival mode. This means you can play for about an hour since you last saved, die, and then you will have to start all over again. Plus, like any high-level difficulty, enemies have a tendency to deal a lot more damage to the player. However, the nice thing here is that you can deal a lot of damage back, so there's a lot of damage going both ways. And really, all of these factors, when added together, make for a very tense and fun experience if you've got the stomach for it. Battles that you usually steamrolled through with a couple stim packs now require some appropriate planning and strategy in order to pull off successfully. Of course, there's also very hard mode, which I would say is actually a little bit more difficult than playing in the newly updated survival mode. This is because very hard mode still uses a lot of the old difficulty balancing that was originally implemented at this game's launch. While stim packs heal faster than they do in survival mode, the player deals 50% of the damage that they normally would to enemies that seemingly have not only more health, but on top of that, most of these enemies typically deal twice the amount of damage that they normally would. Ultimately, both difficulties should provide you with a sufficient challenge. Number 3. Try a new build or setup. While Fallout 4's combat is usually either about shooting people or beating them to death with either various blunt as well as sharp objects, there's a very good chance that you didn't optimize your character around doing both things. There's also a pretty good chance that you haven't experienced each skill in this game, unless you've played to extremely high levels and you're like a level 180 or something. As far as guns go, you can choose to use semi-automatic pistols and rifles or all automatic weapons. So one playthrough you could use pistols, while you could use rifles in the next, and then maybe in the third playthrough you could use either heavy weapons or automatic weapons instead. Or if you've played through Fallout 4 using primarily guns, maybe you could try a melee style playthrough. Or maybe you could do like a hybrid build where you combine pistols with automatics and maybe melee with heavy weapons. Another thing you might want to look into is putting together a build that's based around VATS versus a build that's based around stealth and sneak attack damage. As far as VATS type builds go, you can heavily invest in agility and luck to get access to perks which help with action point regeneration and other perks like Critical Banker which allow you to store critical hits. Or maybe you can make a crazy sniper build based around sneak attack damage where you get perks like Ninja, Mr. Sandman, and you combine that with certain chems like Calmex to achieve massive amounts of damage. Ultimately, there are a lot of possibilities here on how to complete this game. You should really try some of the different strategies if you're getting bored with some of the ones that you've mastered. Number 2, impose some restrictions on your playthrough. Something that you may find that you would want to do is impose some restrictions on yourself to make the game even more difficult. A few examples could include things like playing without power armor unless you are absolutely required to do so, or you could just forego power armor entirely. Maybe you could do a playthrough without using your HUD and emulate sort of the difficulty mode or the ranger mode that you see in the Metro franchise of games. Maybe you could also do a playthrough where you do a semi-hardcore mode where if you die, you basically have to start your character all over again from the very beginning. Figuring out what restrictions to impose on yourself can take some time, but I think a few of the suggestions that I've outlined here should give you a couple ideas. At the very least, try playing through the game without power armor and without the HUD enabled. This should make the game a little bit harder, especially the higher you've set the difficulty. Come up with some ideas and try them, and you might just have some fun. Number 1, learn more about the lore. A big component of a lot of Bethesda's games is that they have some lore that goes over a lot of the established history within the universe. Exploring and learning about some of this stuff can be pretty interesting, and it's worth occasionally looking at some of the in-game terminals to determine what's happening within each individual game and compare it to previous games in the franchise. You can find some interesting changes between each of the games. Like, for example, potatoes exist in Fallout 3, but they are somehow extinct in Fallout 4. There are also some other more infamous changes, like how jet is now apparently a pre-war drug as opposed to a post-war drug that can appear in pre-war vaults. On the flip side, some of the new lore that's established in each new entry to a franchise can give us some clues on the canon ending for the previous game in the franchise. For example, we know that the Project Purity was activated in the Capital Wasteland based on some dialogue that Deacon says. And we also know that the Brother of Steel had some internal infighting between the Lions group and the Outcasts, where I guess we can assume that the Outcasts won based on the colors of the Brotherhood power armor. There are plenty of places you can go to learn more about the lore. I think some of the best resources are both the Fallout Wiki by Fandom as well as the Fallout Wiki by Gamepedia. You can also find some pretty good places where people discuss the lore, like on the Fallout Lore subreddit. And another thing you could probably do is read some of the Fallout Bible that was originally written by Chris Avallone. While the Fallout Bible is most likely no longer canon, some of the stuff that it talks about is fairly interesting. One of the most important things is that it somewhat helps to establish a timeline for the events in the universe. In some ways, the lore may actually be more interesting than the game itself. So I think it's worth looking into whether you've completed the game already or not. Alright guys, that's going to wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like and let me know what's something that you like to do when you're bored in Fallout 4. As always, take care and I'll see y'all next time.